Okay, hi guys. So today we will be solving a Leetcode problem called 238 product of array except self. Given an integer array nums, return an array answer such that answer at I is equal to the product of all the elements of nums except nums.I. The product of any prefix or suffix of nums is guaranteed to fit in 32-bit integer. You must write an algorithm that runs in O of n time without using division operation. So in here, our input is nums array. So let's talk about our output. So if we go over the example 1, we can compare our input with the output. So let's see. We are given array with 1, 2, 3, 4. And on our output for first element is 24. So basically they're saying if we are iterating through the array and we're at this index 0, we need to include the elements in all the elements except for the one on index 0. So we are getting 24 here because if we multiply 2 by 3 by 4, we would get 24. And if we do the same thing with 2, let's say our index is 1, we would multiply 1 times 3 times 4, which would give us 12. And we'll do the same thing for each element. So our output is multiplication of all the element except for element in certain index. Okay. And our constraint, I can just put it as optimize. And our edge case would be, let's say if they give us empty array, then return empty array. So let's take care of the edge case first. So say if nums.length equals to 0, return an empty array. Okay, so I am thinking for this problem, I'm thinking of using a helper method. So in our helper method, what we would do is use a helper method. So in our helper method, we'll pass in index and array. So what we're gonna do is we iterate over the array and check if the index that's passed in is same as index of the iteration. If it is, then don't add to multi. If not, then we can add to multiplication. Okay, let me write the code for helper method, and then I think it will become more clear if it is a bit confusing right now. So I'm just going to take the same name, but I'm going to put underscore to indicate that it's a helper function. So we're going to pass in a function, nums array, and index. Okay, so we need a variable to, sorry, my boots fell. So we need a variable to keep track to return at the end. So let's call that result. And for now, we'll assign it as 1. So the reason I'm assigning 1 and not 0 is because when you're doing multiplication, you don't want to multiply by 0. If you do, then the result will be 0. So when you do multiplication, just make sure you start with 1. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over the nums array. So we're going to say let I equals 0. I is less than nums dot length and I plus plus. So the reason I'm using the for loop is because I need the index. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say if index is not equal to I, then we do result times equal nums dot I, and then we'll return the result. So what we're saying is that we're passing the index and an array. So let's say our index here is 0 for our example input. So that would be element 1. So let's say our index is 0. So we iterate over the nums and we're going to compare if the I is 0. So if the I is 0 and the index is 0, then we're not going to run this if statement. But if index is 0 and I is anything other than 0, we will include that element and multiply that to our result. So at the end, we should get the answer 24 for our helper method. So if we were to do it for, let's say, the 2, so that's index 1, it would give us 12 as an answer, because we're going to check if the index, let's say 1, is same as the I, which could be 1, and if that's the case, we're not going to do anything. But if it is not the same, then we'll multiply that element with our result. Okay, so in this case, the answer would be 12. Anyhow, so I'm thinking that now we have that information to get each value of the array. We just need to make sure that we iterate over the nums and pass in I as an index, and then do it for all the elements. So run the helper function in all the elements until we don't have any elements in the num. So let's code that out. I'm gonna say let new array equals to empty. So the reason I'm initializing the new array is because we need to keep track of all the result and push it into the new array, and that should be our result. So what we're gonna do is for let j equals 0. J is less than nums dot length and j plus plus. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna say new array dot push, and then I'm going to pass in the helper method, and then I would put in nums as usual, and our index will be j. And then we would return new array. So with this logic, we're basically iterating over the nums and running the helper function in each index. And all the result we'll get, we're pushing it into new array. So let's code this test. Let's test this code out and see what, or like if it passes the code. Okay, it looks like, at least for the first case, it passed. and let's try to submit it and see if we run into any issue. Okay, so it passed. So as you can see that previously I did try to do the question, and first, what I was thinking was I wasn't really thinking of array having same element. I guess like when I saw the input they had provided, I assumed that like each element would be unique, which is not really like good assumption because they didn't really say that it would be unique. But I guess I just assumed thinking that it would be unique considering they gave the example. So I ran into a case where the elements were same but the index were different. So initially I had it so I was comparing to check if the values, if the values was so let me say that again. So initially I had it so that instead of index, I was actually comparing the value itself to see that if one exists in the array, then I don't add that to multiplication. But that's wrong, because if I had like 1 after 4, it would not work. It would not be correct, but it will because it will completely ignore that 1. I mean, I guess the 1 works in a way because, if you multiply something with 1, it will be same answer. But let's say if it had 2 after 4, that would be wrong, because the way I was thinking before, it would actually like ignore the 2 because I was checking the value instead of checking the index. Anyhow, I just wanted to go over the problem again and explain what I learned. And also, it's not really good to assume. You just have to make sure that you think about all the test cases. But yeah, thanks. Bye.